How you doing, folks? My name is Chuck Wagon Mac, and I present a show that I travel around the country with, and I tell the history of the cowboy. Yep, I tell about the Chuck Wagon, the big old-time cattle drive back in the 1860 era. And believe me, it was nowhere near as pretty and romantic as Hollywood's always portrayed it. It sure was a nasty, hard way to make a living. And I'll tell you about things pertaining to the cook that you'd never think about. And also the hardship that the cowboy had, and why quite a few of them didn't even live to be 30 years old, and the poor wages they worked for. We don't know how lucky we are today compared to what they had in those days there. I put this show together about 14 years ago, and over the time I've gathered up some pretty darn interesting antiques as well as some interesting stories. Now, everything I tell is factual. Nothing I tell you is what was come out of a storytelling book. I tell you the history of what things were like. I work fairs and festivals right from Florida all the way up to Massachusetts and Vermont and Connecticut. And I work some of the biggest fairs in the country. I like to hit a little bit about the importance of the cook on the cattle drive. A few things you'd never think about how important he was. How he had to have breakfast ready by 4 o'clock in the morning. That might be for 18, 20, or 25 men, and do all that cooking over a campfire. After breakfast, by God, the cook still wasn't done, because now he's got to pack up his camp, go out and gather up 4 mules and harness them, and then drive the wagon all day. About 3:30 in the afternoon, he'd be at the next campsite, set it all back up again, now start supper. But after supper, shucks, that cook still wasn't done, because that's when he was also the doctor, the dentist, the barber, the banker, and even the veterinarian training the sick horses. But the very last day of the night, the cook had the most important job of the day, one that we take for granted. But I'm not going to tell you about that because I want you to come to the fair to hear the rest of the story. Some of the highlights I point out about the cowboys you'd never think about, and that's some of the equipment they wore. Yeah, I remember they were awful poor. And most of the things they had is just the essentials they need. One of the most piece of equipment a cowboy could own was his bandana. You've all seen it over the years, every cowboy wearing a bandana, and you'd never believe what an important piece of equipment that could be. Yes, folks, there's approximately 31 reasons why a cowboy could use a bandana. Yep. It might be used for a towel, might be used for a washcloth. On hot days, he might turn it completely around, fluff it up, keep his neck from getting sunburned. Or maybe take it off, put it over the top of his hat, tie it under his chin, keep his hat from blowing away. Yeah, folks, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the history of the cowboy himself, that things you'd never think about, such as when a cowboy rode into camp, you might want to know where he's from. Well, shucks, you have a license plate nailed on the back of the horse, so that didn't work. But you tell where a man was from by simply looking down his feet to see what kind of spurs he had on. A man rode into camp with this type of spur here, well, heck, that would just simply tell you he was from Mexico. And this type of spur here, you still see it has a Spanish flair to it, but you had a little bit different style. And this would tell you that man was from California way. All right, the spur I happen to have on my boot here would tell you that man was from Montana. But also you notice on them spurs, you see a little jingle bob hanging down there. There's a good reason for that. You see that on a lot of spurs. Yeah, there's that song about the spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle. But the reason for the spur jingles were that when they're on the cattle drive and they're riding night herd on the cows, they'd be riding along on their horse in the pitch dark. The cattle would hear you coming by the jingling of your jingle bobs. And you did not startle a cow when you come up on them, and maybe get the whole herd up in the air and get them restless again. So jingle bobs served a very important part of a cowboy spur. You notice I'll have blue denim on because, surprisingly enough, folks, blue denim was not invented yet. Levi Strauss went out to California with the idea of building tents for the gold miners. He was going to use the used sails off of sailboats. The heck, when he got out there, he seen all the gold miners crawling around their little caves, and woolen clothes are all torn and tattered. He's after building tents, so I started building clothes. So original clothes the earlier cowboys and that were wearing were made out of brown ducking, such as I got on here. And then eventually got different colors like chocolate brown and black. Blue denim itself was not invented till 1894. Now if you notice when we're looking at my clothing I had on, There's one thing I didn't have on we see every cowboy wearing. That was a gun. Heck, hardly any cowboy even owned a gun, let alone need one. Again, that's Hollywood's version. How Hollywood come up with the idea was when a cowboy's on the cattle drive, or every 2.5, 3 weeks, they might get near a town. The boss would give them a day off, and they go into town. First thing they done, they got a good bath. After that, they might go downstairs, get a few whiskeys. Next thing you know, walking down the main street of town, there's a brand new novelty thanks to George Eastman, and that was a photography studio. One cowboy said, "Come on, boys, we're going to have our picture taken, sent home to the family." Shucks, they go in there and get themselves all straightened out, get themselves all trimmed up real pretty. They go to the picture take, and the photographer says, "Oh, wait a minute, guys, here. Take my gun and put that down in your waist." And that's what they would do. They'd take the gun and put it down here in their waist. They'd have their picture taken. They'd send it home with a letter and embellish it a little bit and tell the people about how wild and wildy the West was. When in reality, they didn't own the gun, and for the most part didn't need one. Well, naturally, the family get the picture and they get the letter. They go around and tell everybody, "My golly, it's so wild out there, Charlie's got to have a gun to fight off the Indians." Heard Charlie didn't own the gun, and for the most part didn't need one. But yet, that's how Hollywood got the idea every cowboy owned a gun. What would happen on a cattle drive if some yahoo shot off his gun? Well, shucks, naturally, we'd have a stampede, 3 or 4 days of hard work, and maybe only gather up about 90% of the cows that we had. So that's another good reason. I'm not saying the trail boss will run the cattle drive, and I'm not saying he may not have a few guns in the wagon, but the average individual cowboy did not own a gun, for the most part didn't need one. There's a story about a cowboy went into a restaurant one day, and shucks, he ordered a cup of coffee. Waiter says, "Man, do you want cream and sugar?" He shucks, "No, ma'am, just coffee, not too much water either." Now, one of the things I bring along and set up all the time is this easel map right here. And I have a few interesting points on here to give you an idea of the reasons for the cattle drive. This black line across here, that was Union Pacific Railroad. While the red line coming up from the bottom is the famous cattle drive trail known as the Chisholm Trail. And the green one here is known as the Goodnight Loving Trail. Yep, each one of those cattle drive trails you're looking at there were approximately 1,200 miles long. Now when they're driving cattle back in 1860 era, they could very easily be driving 1, 2, maybe 4,000 head of cattle at a time, and they only averaged 9 miles a day. Yep, 9 miles a day. That 1,200-mile trip took 3.5 to 4 months, and shucks, that was riding in the saddle 8, 10, and 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was not as romantic as you'd think it'd be. So folks, anyways, this is a little idea of what my chuck wagon is about. Everything I try to tell is factual and nothing fictional like you read in a lot of books and what you see on the TV and in the movies. I try to tell you about factual things that are about realistic as could be. And I do this not always because I have to. I do it an awful lot because I love to. I've always loved the West, and hopefully I spread that message out with whatever I tell.
Chuck Wagon Mac recreates the Old West atmosphere with a replica mid-1800s chuck wagon with all the antiques and cowboy gear that were found in those Old West cattle camps. You'll see hands-on visual displays of all the cowboys' gear, including cookware, barbed wire fencing, branding irons, harnesses, tack, and lots more. Chuck Wagon Mac relates the origin and the purpose of the real cowboys' personal gear and work equipment, with storytelling, historic trivia, and lectures on how the cowboys survived on the trail. For Tales of the Old West, it's Chuck Wagon Mac. Call today for show schedules and booking information.